Welcome back again this week to another analysis behind the news. We're going to talk again a little bit about Ukraine from a different angle and the Neocon movement and how it all ties together. Now let me give you a little history first that I know you're going to find very difficult to believe. This is history that I've researched over 40 years, and I'm going to be putting it into a book of at least 600 pages on the early history of the United States from the angle of neocons, communism, and all the rest of it, and the war against the Constitution and God in the United States. Let me say that the foreign policy of the United States has been basically neocon since the Civil War, even earlier than that. Originally, what we conspiracy theorists have to say about history is that there was a movement to destroy God and society as a whole. This conspiracy emanated, for all practical purposes, out of an organization called the Illuminati. The Illuminati went along over a few years, and then as individuals in leadership within the organization came about and got influence, they all formed their own little organizations. One of the things that they did was to actually split into two strategies, if you will, for forming a one-world government. They wanted a one-world government and no religion, that the religion would be the state, that people would worship the state, would look to the state as their God. And so these two movements became essentially what became known as the Marxist movement, the communist movement, in other words, and ultimately what became known as the neocon movement. Now, the leaders of this embryonic moment in the split were, generally speaking, those that followed Marx versus those that followed Mazzini. You can look all these things up online after we're done here. But at any rate, there were a number of individuals in the United States that wanted to use the United States as the empire builder to produce a new world order. And so there were many individuals that went that route, and the other route were the communists who wanted to do it all over the world, all at the same time. So and I'm dragging this out a little bit, but you can look up Young America was part of this early neocon movement of using the United States empire building to bring about a new world order. But in this time frame, you had a number of individuals that were appointed into foreign service by the presidents. Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Grant, and then on, of individuals who were either communists or were part of this idea of using America as the empire builder. Even at that time period, you had the head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate of the United States, Charles Sumner, who actually joined the Communist Internationale while he was the head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate. You might take a little time to look that up to find out whether that's fact or not. Might take you a little while, but ultimately you'll find the evidence for that. So we had both the Foreign Service at the executive level and the legislative level through the leadership of Charles Sumner and others, obviously, who wanted to use the United States to build the New World Order. Now, I could spend more time talking about history in this regard, but that in essence is what was happening. Ultimately, the foreign policy of the United States became this empire-building, new world order, neocon, whatever label you want to put on it, under Theodore Roosevelt, who was a progressive, if you recall. He ran the second time on the Progressive Party, which was nicknamed the Bull Moose Party. But in essence, Theodore Roosevelt was a socialist, just like his nephew. And if you take a look at his speeches after he was President of the United States, you cannot come to any other conclusion that he was at minimum a socialist. At any rate, on up to today, we see the neocon movement promoting this idea of unifying and regionalizing governments, ultimately to form a one-world government. They seem at odds with the communists from time to time, just like they did back in 1840 or 1850 and thereon. But they all have the same goal of a one-world government and a new world order. Just who's going to run it and how are they going to get there? So the neocon movement in the United States, which includes individuals like Senator Rubio, promote various schemes to bring about this consolidation of countries into larger and larger entities. If you go and read the NATO treaty, you will discover that the NATO treaty is simply an arm of the United Nations, subordinate to the United Nations, can't do anything without the approval of the United Nations. Please go read that treaty. Americans think it has something to do to protect us from the encroachment of communism, and it has nothing to do in that regard. And so we see people like Senator Rubio, who now has a scheme to bring in a number of nations into NATO of the former Russian Empire, like the Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Azerbaijan, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia, and all these other former communist nations. They want now under NATO. Well, Putin wants it under Russia. And so they look like they're fighting one another, and they may be fighting one another for leadership, but not the overall design of consolidation and regionalization into a new world order. You know, just like Hitler and Stalin had the same designs, but each one of them wanted to be the big shot. And so we had a nasty war over all of this business. The average citizen down at the, the regular level suffer in regards to all these plans. But these are the things that are going on. Now, Rubio also has another scheme connected with this. He has a package of 8 steps Obama must take to punish Russia, in quotes. And a part of that is the consolidation of states like Georgia and the Ukraine into NATO. And even in the Wall Street Journal, Rubio called for the establishment of a currency board to help bail out the currency of the Ukraine. Now, this is very interesting. They've come up with this scheme to help the Ukraine balance its currency, to make it stable. They owe so much money that they need an infusion of cash from the International Monetary Fund and the Federal Reserve. Interestingly is this: who do they owe the money to? Why are they in trouble? Because they owe so much money. Ladies and gentlemen, they owe the money to Russia. So indirectly, this scheme of Rubio's, this neocon, will actually fill the coffers of Russia. Now, it doesn't look that way because we're talking about the Ukraine being in trouble and needing to bail out Ukraine. But they owe the money to Russia. Does that make sense? You can't make this stuff up. And if you take a look at everything that's going on today, it is moving irrepressibly toward a new world order, consolidation, 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 whether it's free trade, so-called, or whether it's bailouts of country like Ukraine financially, whatever it is, NATO, it's all moving to consolidate, consolidate, consolidate into a single government, a world court, a single currency. And that, if you keep that in mind, that is what's going on. Whether it's coming from Putin, whether it's coming from Obama, whether it's coming from McCain or Rubio or Lindsey Graham, no matter who it is in these neocon movements, that's where it's going. Regardless of the rhetoric and how patriotic it may appear, it's just a matter of who's going to get to the finish line first, as to who's going to rule, but they're going to rule us. Until next week, we'll see you then.